Hey gang, it's Ruben. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to the Chatting With series. I am super thrilled from my next guest, Mr. Tim O'Neill. Tim is a podcaster and a blogger. He's got this great website called History for Atheists. Tim is an atheist and I'm a Christian, so we're technically on opposite sides of the fence, but this is one episode I think everybody's going to love because we come together for common ground, which is to debunk bad pop culture mythology when it comes to Christmas and appropriating paganism and all that kind of fun stuff. So Tim, how are you today? How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, thanks, Ruben. It's early morning where I am, so I'm hopefully I'll wake up in a minute. But yeah, I'm in Sydney.
Yeah, you're joining us from Australia. So you are a history writer and have just done extensive research, just spending time in history. You can easily tell that's your passion by your website. But I guess dive in a second and just get into like what has you like really passionate about debunking that kind of just ignorant claims when it comes to history in this context, the Christmas appropriating paganism and all of that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, my focus of my website is debunking bad historical claims made by my fellow atheists, and that's why it's called History for Atheists. So I'm really focused on mainly on things that atheists get wrong about history. But in this case, it's kind of interesting. We're actually talking about a topic that is widely misunderstood. And I find the reason I'm talking to you is I find as many Christians believe the myths about Christmas having pagan origins as atheists do. And so do pagans, and modern neo-pagans also believe this. So it's interesting that they all believe the same thing, but for different reasons. So Christians, many Christians say Christmas is pagan in origin. Some of them even say you shouldn't celebrate Christmas because it's not Christian. It's a pagan festival. Atheists say those Christians who celebrate Christmas are stupid because it's a pagan festival and they're just celebrating something that's pagan, but they don't realize it. And then neo-pagans, modern pagans, say it's a pagan festival, and so we need to take it back because it was stolen by Christians, and we need to reappropriate it. But they're all wrong because the whole idea that Christmas is fundamentally somehow pagan is basically based on a whole lot of largely sort of 19th century and early 20th century folkloric misconceptions.
Well,
So
speaking of that, what I think is kind of funny is you on your website, you've got kind of an FAQ of, I guess you probably heard some just common detractors enough to even put a section on there. But I thought it was quite funny to me as a Christian, right? Is you got one that says, hey, why are you helping out the enemy? As if like telling people correct history is like somehow like bad for people. I just chuckle at that because it's like, I don't care what side of the fence you're on. If you're a Christian or just a believer in general, or if you're just an agnostic or an atheist, you don't want to be speaking from a place of ignorance. So I took a laugh at that one. I don't know if you want to tell us a bit more about that particular FAQ in particular, like how much heat do you get for like helping me, the enemy, and stuff like this? I mean, even go to my channel, right? So
yeah, well, many atheists are kind of more activist type atheists. Do sort of see people like you as the enemy, and they see Christianity as something that needs to be sort of fought against and debunked. And I think that's it's mainly American atheists who act that way, and I think it's partly because of the role that Christianity and evangelical Christianity in particular plays in American politics. So they kind of they see it as a political fight, whereas I'm in Australia. We're not very religious in Australia, and it doesn't play that sort of role in politics. So it isn't such an issue for atheists like me. I'm just an atheist because I don't happen to have a belief in God. But I'm not a Richard Dawkins style of atheist that thinks that people like you need to be told that you're deluded. If you believe in God and believing in Christianity, fine. If you try and impose it on me, then you'll probably get a fairly sharp rebuke. But I think you seem like a nice person, Ruben. So I don't think you're going to do that.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. Well, let's just kind of jump right into it because, of course, as you guys know who watch my stuff, I try to keep this to a 30-minute format. And I know Tim is so compassionate, he could spend hours on this if I let him. But just a little bit of background. I actually did an episode a year ago with some assistance from a scholar named Peter Gainsford, who's actually kind of down in your neck of the woods, where
Yeah.
he likes to put it in a bulletproof friendly way that I like to call the 12 myths. And interesting enough, you also have an actual page on your blog called 12 Myths. But one in particular, you deep dive into this topic with the myth concerning Christmas, Mithras, and paganism. So let me just kind of sit back and let you unpack that for a minute on this particular aspect of the Mithras appropriating myth when it comes to Christianity.
Okay, so one of the myths is, and it's a pretty fundamental part of this whole mythology around Christmas, is that basically that Christianity came along and it appropriated a pagan festival, and the reason we celebrate the Christmas, and the reason many Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th, is that there was a pagan festival on December 25th, and it was basically stolen by Christians, and all of the trappings associated with it, gift giving and feasting and Christmas trees and so on, were all originally pagan ideas that Christianity just sort of stole. One of the claims is that the reason all this happens on December 25th is that December 25th was a great festival of the Roman cult of Mithras. Mithras was a Roman god and was basically a sort of a solar deity, a sun god. And so the claim is that because December 25th was traditionally known as the winter solstice, they celebrated the birthday of Mithras on December 25th. Now, the solstice is actually December 21st, and the Romans knew that, but for various complicated reasons to do with calendars, it was traditionally celebrated on December 25th. The problem with the claim, though, that basically that Christianity stole a Mithras festival on December 25th is that there was no Mithras festival on December 25th. So that's a major problem with the claim. There's a second problem with the claim, though. The idea that Mithraism was some kind of big public religion that people celebrated feasts and festivals of is completely wrong. Mithraism was a mystery cult. It was a secret initiate religion. You didn't have big festivals out in the streets for Mithras. Your worship of Mithras was something that you did very much in secret, literally underground. Their temples were in caves or were underground, or were, even if they were buildings, they were kind of decorated inside to make it look like a cave. That was part of the theatre of Mithraic worship. But it was a mystery faith in that you had to be invited to join it. You couldn't just sort of say, I'm now a Mithraist. It was a members only club. It was men only. You couldn't be a Mithraist if you were a woman. And it was very secret. We know very little about it, precisely because no one talked about it, and very little was written down about exactly what they believed. So we're really working on guesswork from the iconography, from the sculptures and the few inscriptions that we have from Mithraic temples. But it was quite a popular faith. It was very popular among soldiers and among merchants. But the problem with this claim is that the claim is that it was some great big Mithraic feast that everyone celebrated. Well, one, that's not true. That's not how the Mithraic faith worked. But two, there's absolutely no evidence that there was any kind of celebration of Mithras on December 25th. So where did this come from? Well, 19th and early 20th century scholars interpreted one reference in a document called the Calendar of Philocus, also known as the Chronography of 354, as referring to Mithras. This is a list of feast days and celebrations to be celebrated in the year 354. And on December 25th, it lists two festivals. One is the birth of Jesus. So it says, the Natalia of Christus. It's the birth of Jesus, December 25th. The other is it designates a circus game, so chariot races, for the unconquered one. And one of the titles of Mithras was Invictus, the unconquered one. So it was interpreted for a while there, for a long time there, as being a reference to Mithras. Modern scholars now reject that and now think that it was actually a reference to the sun god Sol, who was also called Sol Invictus or Invictus. So they don't think this was a reference to Mithras. So the idea that there was some kind of Mithraic festival on December 25th is basically a pretty outdated one, but you still get it, you see it repeated all the time. There's no evidence for it.
Which now the Sol Invictus, though, help me out here, because believe it or not, I actually was an atheist a lot of my life too, and I used to peddle the appropriation thing, but I stuck to the very sophomoric basic one of that. Constantine and the Roman side was trying to essentially get rid of winter solstice celebrations, which I think is where Sol Invictus might be, and to appropriate that in the context of Christianity. Did you find anything in the Sol Invictus piece along those lines or anything like that?
Yeah, so this is another way in which the idea of December 25th being appropriated from paganism is argued. That okay, it wasn't Mithras, but it was Sol Invictus. It was the sun god, and he did have a celebration on December 25th, because December 25th, as I said before, was the winter solstice. That is based on two things. One, the chronography that I just mentioned, the reference to chariot races on December 25th for the unconquered one, which seems to be a reference to Sol Invictus. The other is back in the middle of the 3rd century, the Emperor Aurelian designated the Sol cult, so the cult of Sol Invictus, as the state religion for the Roman Empire. He came along in the middle of the 3rd century and basically was trying to kind of bring the empire back together. It had almost fallen apart. 3rd century was a bit of a disaster, and at one point the empire split into three parts. He came along and kind of brought it all back together. And what he was trying to do was to kind of put the empire back on a more solid political and religious footing. So he declared this new state religion, which was worship of the sun, worship of Sol Invictus. And he did say that on December 25th, we should celebrate the rebirth or the birth of Sol Invictus. That was in the mid-4th century, 3rd century. So people often say, well, there you are, there it is. There's a clear indication of a pagan festival on December 25th, which Christians appropriated. But there's a problem, and that's that we have references to Christians celebrating and regarding December 25th as the birthday of Jesus before that. So that was a new festival that Aurelian brought in. But we've got Hippolytus of Rome writing about December 25th as a Christian writer, writing about December 25th as the birthday of Jesus in about 220, so well before Aurelian instituted that. Which brings us to the question, okay, why did they settle on December 25th? It seems like they weren't appropriating a pagan festival because they came up with this date before Aurelian, before the chronography of 354. So why December 25th? What seems to have happened, and this is not absolutely clear, but this is what modern scholars now are coming around to. What seems to have happened is that in the 2nd century, Christian writers and Christian thinkers were trying to find a way to map Jesus onto the history of the world. They saw him obviously as the climax of history, and they were trying to find a way to sort of see how he fitted into the whole of history. One of the things they had to do was work out, well, when he was. That sounds a bit weird to us, but they were actually a little bit vague on exactly when Jesus was around. They knew he was around in the time of Pontius Pilate because the gospel said so. They knew that he was around in the reign of Tiberius, and they knew that he was born sometime in the reign of Augustus. This is all going on the Gospels. Now, we could put aside the question of whether the Gospels actually got that stuff right. It's another question entirely. But what they did was they first of all, they worked out when they think he died. And they came up with the idea that he died in 33 AD. and then they worked backwards from there. So a guy called Dionysius Exiguus is the guy who came up with the BC AD dating system based on this chronography of Jesus's life. And so he worked out that according to the calendar we now use, the BC AD calendar, that Jesus died in 33 AD. From that, they worked out, looking at the Gospels, that he must have died on March 25th, 33 AD. And that's based on references in the Gospels to Passover preparation day, the day he died, and the day the Gospels say he rose from the dead. So they said, okay, it has to be March 25th, 33 AD.
And they were taking that from leanings of like 14 Nisan, which is the Jewish calendar.
That's right, yeah. So they worked out that it had to have been 14 Nisan in the Jewish calendar. They mapped that to the Roman calendar, the Julian calendar, and came up with the date of 33 AD, March 25th. So what's that got to do with when he was born? That's the bit that's a little bit fuzzy. But there seems to be that what happened was there was a Jewish tradition that great prophets died on the same date that they were born. So they died on their birthday. It's a bit of a bummer for them, but that was the belief. What seems to have happened, though, is that Christians, because they regarded Jesus' conception as more significant than his birth, because it was miraculous, the whole virgin birth thing, they then decided, okay, that he was conceived on March 25th. And if you add 9 months to March 25th, you get December 25th. So what seems to have happened is they worked out when he died. They decided that he died on the same date as the day he was conceived. They decided he was conceived on March 25th, died on March 25th. March 25th plus 9 months equals December 25th. Now, why did this? There were other rival dates being kicked around for the date of his birth. Why did this one stick? Why was this the one that became most common? It seems to be because March 25th was traditionally the spring equinox, and December 25th was traditionally the winter solstice. So what they've done is they've kind of mapped Jesus' life onto the cosmology of the year. And of course, people in ancient times who lived much closer to nature than us, things like the equinoxes and the solstices were actually very important. But what people have done is they've noticed that, of course, that it was the solstice, and they said, well, there must have been a big pagan festival on the solstice. There wasn't. As I said, Aurelian instituted a new festival for Sol Invictus on the solstice in the 4th century. But Christians had already decided that Jesus was born on December 25th, it seems, for this sort of chronographical reason, long before that. So it's not that they appropriated some pagan festival. They came up with this calculation based on the Bible. It was purely Christian. Pretty dubious, but purely Christian.
Well, I love that you unpack that. And also, like, that a lot of time was spent in the working backwards with the AD/BC system is also, again, kind of another Christian thing. So yeah, that's kind of another bonus check mark for our side as well. But let me ask you another question, Tim, because I didn't find a deep dive material on your site about this particular myth, but I'm sure you got plenty to say on this one as well. And I wanted to touch base with you about this one. And I heard a sermon the other day from a pretty big national pastor. I'm not going to name drop, but what tends to happen is when a big pastor brings up a subject matter, you'll have that kind of cascade down where smaller church pastors will essentially copy paste kind of thing. And what he was misspeaking about was the whole, oh, well, Constantine also wanted to smash down the Saturnalia worship, and that's why Christianity celebrates Christmas on December 25th, was because Rome wanted to nationalize Christianity and get rid of pagan worship, in this case, Saturnalia. And I just rolled my eyes because I was like, great, now that's going to be like a newfound like theme in this year's Christmas services. And so it just made me sad. But what can you tell us about this particular myth with Saturnalia?
Okay. So the Romans did have a midwinter festival called Saturnalia, and it was a very ancient festival associated with the god Saturn. Saturn was one of the oldest of the Roman gods, one of the ones that they didn't import from Greece. It was one that seemed to be native to Italy. So this was a very ancient festival. The problem with claiming that Saturnalia is the reason for the date of Christmas, December 25th, is that Saturnalia falls on December 17th. So no. But what happened was, because it was a very popular festival, it extended from December 17th, it extended over 3 days, but that still only gets us to December 20th. And even in its most extended form, where it was celebrated for an entire week, that still only gets us to December 24. So the idea that the date, December 25th, somehow comes from Saturnalia, it simply doesn't work. And that's why, again, modern scholars tend to feel that it was actually this chronographical calculation about when he was born, when he died, when he was born, and therefore when he was conceived, and therefore when he was born. The other claim that you often get is that a lot of what we do at Christmas actually comes from Saturnalia. So you hear claims that the Romans used to decorate their front door with a wreath, the way we do with a Christmas wreath. They used to erect a tree and decorate it in their homes. They used to decorate their homes with holly and ivy and mistletoe as part of Saturnalia, and that they feasted, drank wine, had parties, and gave each other gifts. So the claim is that all this stuff that we do at Christmas actually is just Saturnalia practices that have been Christianized, and it's always Constantine that gets blamed for this stuff. But the problem with that is that when you look at the actual evidence that we have about what the Romans did at Saturnalia, almost none of those things actually are found anywhere in the evidence. There's nothing about a wreath. There's nothing about holly, ivy, or mistletoe. There's nothing about decorating a tree. That's all nonsense. They did parties, so they did drink and feast. They had a good time, but that's kind of what humans do at any kind of festival. So I don't think that's a particularly pagan thing. That's just kind of what humans do. The only element of Saturnalia which does seem to appear to actually parallel what we do is the gift giving bit. But the gifts that they gave were a bit different to the ones we give. The main gift that they gave were little ceramic, little pottery decorations, little figurines that they would kind of exchange. And you would put those up around your house at Saturnalia and then tuck them away when the festival was over, and then bring them out and exchange them again with your relatives and friends. So it's a little bit different to our gift giving. But the connection between that and what we do is probably not actually there. It seems that what's happened is, after Saturnalia began to die out when Christianity came along, which was probably, it existed into the 6th, maybe 7th century. But that gift-giving tradition at midwinter does seem to have died. And we give gifts at Christmas, not because of anything to do with Saturnalia. What actually happened was the gift-giving part of Christmas was originally not associated with Christmas Day. It was associated with the feast of St. Nicholas, and that's on December 6th. So Nicholas was regarded as a man who was kind to children, generous, gave gifts, and that's why there was a gift-giving tradition on St. Nicholas's Day, which is December 6th. And of course, St. Nicholas in Dutch is Sinterklaas, which is where we get Santa Claus. So Santa Claus is basically a derivation from St. Nicholas. And what's happened is the gift-giving tradition on December 6th has kind of drifted, and eventually, quite recently, only in about the 19th century, became associated with December 25th. So that's a very recent thing. And that gift-giving tradition on December 25th has got nothing to do with Saturnalia. It comes from the Feast of St. Nicholas. I know Dutch people who still get their presents on December 6th, though they also get some presents on December 25th as well. So they get 2 ones. But in many parts of northwestern Europe, they still do the gift-giving part on December 6th, not on December 25th. So that's got nothing to do with Saturnalia. The only element of the Saturnalia celebrations which may have survived and become part of Christmas was what they called the Saturnalia Princeps. It was a kind of a tradition where you elected someone as a kind of as a ruler for the day, and they could give everyone orders, and they used to order people to do things that were kind of silly for fun. So you'd have to stand on one leg and sing a song or something like that. That seems to possibly have survived into the Middle Ages as a kind of a tradition known as the Lord of Misrule, or sometimes in cathedrals they would elect, at Christmas time, they would elect what was called the boy bishop. So one of the lowest ranking members of the cathedral choir, a choir boy, would be made bishop for the day, and he would have to give the real bishop and everyone else orders, and that was considered very funny. But is there actually a connection between the boy bishop tradition, the Lord of Misrule tradition, and the princeps tradition of Saturnalia? We don't know. It could just be that that's stuff that people do for fun, and it could just be a parallel rather than a connection.
Nice, nice. Well, with the 5 minutes that we have left, I'm going to spend a second to talk you up here a little bit, Tim. So I love some of the praise that you have here. Here's a quote from Professor of Greek Culture at the University of Cambridge. Getting history right is crucial, and no one, neither the religious nor the irreligious, should get a free ride when it comes to instrumentalizing the past. Tim O'Neill's forthright blog does a valuable job in keeping us all honest and reminding us that historical evidence rarely behaves as one might want it to. So y'all best be taking Tim's passion on this subject very seriously. I know I do, which is why I was super thrilled that you agreed to come on and talk to us about it, Tim. I guess in closing, give us a second. Tell us about either your website or your YouTube channel, History for Atheists, or even your podcast. Like, what else do you usually like to talk about?
Sure. So the website is History for Atheists. It is aimed at my fellow atheists, saying, if we're going to use history, if you're going to use history to make arguments about religion, you need to get it right. And I suppose I was kind of a bit irritated about the way in which many claims, such as Christians burning down the Great Library of Alexandria, or a lot of the claims about the Galileo trial and so on, which were being used by some prominent atheists, people like Dawkins and Hitchens, were wrong. And so that's how I started the website. It's now evolved into a video channel, so I'm now posting videos on these topics, but also interviewing history writers and historians on some of these topics as well. And I do a audio version of that as a podcast, which is kind of comes out, I don't know, about once a month, once every 2 months or so. It's a bit intermittent. This is a hobby of mine, but I do believe that we need to get history right. I think that goes for atheists in particular, because we're meant to be rationalists. But I think it's important to correct some of these myths about, for example, these ones about Christmas for Christians as well, because I do see a hell of a lot of Christians saying things like, Christmas trees were a pagan tradition. They weren't. And these ones about the date of Christmas and so on, which is basically all wrong. So happy to come on your show, and hopefully I've debunked a few myths, Ruben.
Yeah, super thrilled. And once again, we are not enemies. We can be friends, even though we have different beliefs. I consider you a friend, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on. Y'all can find Tim on Twitter as Tim O'Neill. You can also find him on his YouTube channel, History for Atheists, his website, History for Atheists, and he also has links to his podcast as well. Tim, thank you so much for coming on to my channel. It was a pleasure having you, and super great that you took the time to just help set the record straight about this, my friend.
No problem, Ruben. Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, sir. All right, gang, that's it for this episode. If you like my content, please consider subscribing to my channel. God bless you guys.